Now, to talk more on this, we are joined by Mr. Tony Gosling, historian and investigative journalist from Bristol. Mr. Gosling, nice to see you again. Now, Mr. Gosling, your thoughts on the latest report by Haaretz, which basically says the Israeli regime turned some parts of Gaza into ghost towns. 70% of being demolished is no joke.
And isn't it interesting how Haaretz is basically at war with the government of Israel? I mean, a kind of psychological war anyway, because the government and the armed forces, all of the establishment in Israel, are refusing to communicate with Haaretz. They have basically blacklisted them, even though, of course, Haaretz doesn't really need what they've got to say, because so much of it is lies. Haaretz aren't necessarily just like many other media in the world, like the BBC, for example, just simply repeating what the Israeli government says without actually fact-checking it at all. And so the attack on Jabalia, I mean, I see there are even more people have been killed today, day after day after day. The north of Gaza is being bombed back to the Stone Age. That's the idea, using American weapons and American money mainly, and also British support from the Akrotiri Air Base in Cyprus. And all of this could stop tomorrow if there was a different political force in Britain or in the United States. And everybody is hoping that there's going to be some change, at least in January with Trump. But until then, nothing seems to be happening to end this genocide. If you think about why newspapers like Haaretz are reporting so negatively on Netanyahu and telling the truth from within Israel, that's because you've got a kind of almost latent civil war going on in Israel, because many of the population, as in Nazi Germany back in the 1930s, totally disagree with the policies and the tactics being chosen by their government and by their elite. So you've got, many Haaretz know that the government has been targeting and killing journalists. They are journalists. Obviously, they don't like that, and also they know that Netanyahu is a total failure on the battlefield, with all his objectives failing to get rid of Hamas, instead making it stronger, because there are more people being recruited to it after what's happened. And also failing completely to get the hostages back from the tunnels, etc. He's failed in all these ways, and that's why the Haaretz journalists are quite rightly being very, very critical of their government. The citizens and intellectuals of Israel are completely at war in a metaphorical way with their own government. We also know, of course, that the Syria operation, a regime change, now it's all emerging that it's a US operation, and that the United States had far more troops in Syria than it admitted to. It was lying about that too. So really what's going on in Gaza, the horrors there, as well as in South Lebanon and in Syria, is really just part of the expansion program, a land grab for a greater Israel. That's what it seems to me.
Mr. Gosling, the regime also wants to displace the Gazans, but the question is where to?
Well, that's an excellent question. I think it's one we've been asking for well over a year now. Exactly. The Gaza prison camp is very difficult to get out of, and Ramallah has been flattened pretty much. That's the traditional way of getting in and out via Egypt. So you have to ask questions about that. I mean, nobody can sanction what's happened there. It seems to me that this is a sort of mass human sacrifice that the Israelis are perpetrating in Gaza, with the effect being to potentially start a much wider war. The idea is to bring in, local regional powers like Iran, and also potentially then superpowers even more, the Russians and the United States. But that so far hasn't really worked. Maybe they'll just try to up the ante even more. You've had Amnesty and Human Rights Watch over the last couple of weeks absolutely spelling it out. This is genocide, and the international community doesn't seem doing very much. And one of the most powerful figures in all of this, even though he tries to keep his head very, very low to the ground, away from it, tries not to comment, is King Charles. King Charles is a potentially the peacemaker here, and yet he only comments he's really made so far are condemning the October the 7th, 2023 attacks, calling them terrorism. So he's taken one side, but you know what? He claims to be descended from the line of David, of the royalty of the Jewish faith, as well as he's got this from Cairo University. He's got an honorary degree in Islam, so he's in a very powerful position actually to put a stop to this. The other thing is he appoints all the British Army officers. He appoints the psychological warfare officers, as well as the government ministers are appointed by Charles, even though he gets a list and he's supposed to just tick them off. He's also a big interferer, as we know, through the Black Spider letters, British politics, even though he's supposed to keep well away from this. And so he, I'm afraid, is one of the people who needs to have his feet held to the fire and saying, why are you not stopping this war, Charles? Every minute he lets it carry on. He's actually a perpetrator of the genocide too.
There you have it, Mr. Tony Gosling, historian and investigative journalist from Bristol. Mr. Gosling, thank you for your time. It's always nice talking to you, sir.